Welcome to Latent Treasures, a uniquely uplifting podcast filled with inspiring guests to brighten your week. Our show takes inspiration from a lesser-known quote from C.S. Lewis. What we want is not more little books about Christianity, but more little books by Christians on other subjects, with their Christianity latent. While I love books, this is 2020. And let's face it, audio is a lot easier to produce. But you are more than welcome to think of our little podcast as a bunch of little books about various topics, lived by ordinary people. But these people are quite extraordinary in the way their faith drives them and fuels their journey. Journeys on which they're making profound impacts on everyone around them. We hope you'll be blessed by these stories and recognize that inside each of us is the ability to be similarly extraordinary. If you like our show, please subscribe. And if you find any individual show special, please like it and share it freely. Were you aware that adult adoptions were even possible? Personally, I had no idea that could be done. Today we interview Tami Barnett, who nearly dropped out of law school, but then found herself practicing law as an advocate for the parties in the foster care arena, and later co-founding one of Southern California's premier charitable organizations whose entire mission is to support and advocate for the kids and families in the foster care crisis. Tami is married to a wonderful elementary school teacher and has two smart and energetic kids of her own as well, so you know she isn't exactly swimming in loads of free time. Yet despite the many demands on her daily, she and her team have created a way to be very effective at coming alongside the many parties involved in foster care and helping support and love on them. I have no doubt the future impact they will continue to make will be amazing as they faithfully continue to step into the gaps that need filling. There's something wonderful about watching God show off when people simply show up and trust His promises. Also, don't forget to check out our full show notes on bethechurch.org to learn about the two young women who helped make our show happen. Cheyenne Summers and Mary Rogers provide our cover art and show music respectively, and their links will take you to more of their art for your enjoyment. Please do check them out. But now, without further ado, please enjoy our time with Tami Barnett. Today we welcome Tami Barnett. How are you, Tami?
Good. How are you, Chad?
I'm very good. I'm excited to have you. As you obviously know, we care a lot about the foster community, and you and I go back a little ways in our foster community care together. So for our listeners who have never known who you are, Tami is the founder of an organization called RaisingHOPE, and can be found at RaisingHOPE.org. But it started in a very unique way, and I'd love to hear you share that story with us. But before we jump there, because I'm eager to, give us a little bit of your background, because I don't think you had necessarily originally intended to go down the road of forming a charitable organization when you were, for example, in school and studying, although there were some parallels. But tell us a little bit about your background before your professional life.
Sure. I'm an attorney, so I went to law school, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my law degree. I just enjoyed that field of learning. Growing up, I wanted to be Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, but that changed at some point into a little bit more of how can I help people through the work that I'm going to be doing. And so I went to law school, and in my second year, I almost left because I'm like, I don't like all this stuff that I'm learning, the torts, the constitutional law. I was enjoying learning it. It was fascinating to have in my back pocket or whatever, but I didn't want to do that for a living. I was happy for other people to do it, but I just couldn't see a place for myself doing property law or anything like that. And so I almost dropped out of law school in my second year. And a good friend of mine said, don't leave yet. Go to the internship office at the law school. So when I did that, the professor was very insightful. And she said, well, what is it that you want to do with your life? And I said, I want to help make families whole. And she said, I have an internship at the children's courthouse, and you can go ahead and apply for it. And I did, and I ended up working for Los Angeles County Council. I was interning for them in the juvenile dependency court, and that is the court where children go when they have been removed from their parent or guardian because of abuse or neglect.
Wow.
And
So where did,
mhm,
pause there.
yeah,
Sorry to interrupt it because we're going to go right back there, but I want to make families whole is not a statement. I think that most of the people, I can't imagine the person in that office, in the intern office, was like, oh yeah, we hear this a lot. Right? Where did that come from? Like what was the foundation of that? Because that's not a typical like career aspiration.
right. Yeah, it comes from I think that the Lord pricked my heart at a very young age just to care for the vulnerability of children. I myself am a child of divorce, and there were some challenges that went along with that. I don't talk publicly about it too much right now because both of my parents are still alive, and I love and respect them so much. But there were challenges that came with that, and I I grew an understanding through myself and through my friends that there were times when children feel alone, completely alone in this world, even though they might have people that love them, and they feel like there's no hope for them. And I could resonate with some of those feelings. And so, wanting to help make families whole meant for me affecting the future of our community, our country, our world, and just starting with the family. I guess at a really young age, I had this instinct that that was how we could really impact the world, one by one, by helping train parents how to care and love for their children, and how to love on children that didn't have that from their parents, and just trying to keep families together in the best way we could.
Yeah. Wow. That's I totally understand that. I also come from a quote unquote, broken home, so to speak. But that's cool to see how it shaped you. It didn't, like some of our other guests we've had conversations with too, didn't leave you broken or resentful. You saw it as a need for care.
Mhm.
That's really
Right.
cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so they connected you to the courthouse in Los
The
Angeles.
children's court. Yes, and I was an intern there for the summer, and it was so fascinating to me. I A lot of people have a hard time going there because you hear really horrible stories of abuse and neglect, but I kind of equate that to a nurse, right? And I'll talk more about my favorite nurse. But a nurse is able to take blood and to, wipe gross things off and see the most disgusting. I could not do that. That is so gross to me. That's not my wheelhouse. For other people who can do that, good for them. I have some weird gift of listening to these very tragic stories and not being destroyed by it, not being buried under it. And so the way that I look at it is, thank God the story is out. We can now help and make an impact. And every story from here forward can be a better, more positive story for this child. Theoretically, that's not always how it plays out, but that's my hope, and certainly the impact that I try to make. So I don't look at the stories as being just so tragic and terrible. I just look at it like we live in a sinful, painful world, and this is an impact that I can make to help this child and this family ultimately.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about Los Angeles is obviously a big city, and there's a lot of bad reputation in the foster care community in general, especially in large cities. And I think sometimes the level of stories, or maybe the stories can feel one-sided relative to there's so many bad caregivers in the providing foster care versus good examples. And I think sometimes the stories can seem lopsided versus reality, right?
Yeah.
So in your time there, I'm sure there were cases of, I guess you'd say bad foster families. And I'm sure there's also cases of really good foster families. Can you paint,
Yeah.
since you were in it in Los Angeles, can you paint a picture of what that balance of that reality actually looks like so people have like an actual inside view?
Sure. Yeah. First, I should go on to say that I finished that summer internship and then when I graduated from law school, I did a few other jobs and then ended up going back to work at the children's courthouse. But in this case, I represented the children, so that's a different party to the case than representing the county, who represents a social worker. Um, so I represented children and I ended up doing that for almost 10 years, kind of off and on as a staff attorney and then as the administrator of the conflict panel. And so I was able to really see a lot of different cases and meet a lot of different foster parents, or as we call them, resource parents now in California. And there are some amazing resource family parents. I think you may even have had Mike and Kristen Wise on your podcast. They're an example of some incredible foster parents who this is not about them. They're not in it for any money. They probably would say, we don't need the money if they could, but they understand that this child needs a home, that they can give this child love, whether it's for a day. I've seen them take children for a day, a weekend, or a couple of years. And whatever the impact of their time that they have together, they can change the narrative of those children's lives and impact it for the better. And not just the child, but parents like them, the foster parents like them work with the biological parents as well. And so now we're seeing foster families empowering the bio parents to say, you can do this. And here's what this child, I've raised 4 kids. That's what maybe Mike and Kristen would say. Here's what worked with my kids. And you're giving a parent who feels like maybe they grew up in foster care, maybe they have a cycle of abuse and neglect that they're overcoming and they don't have a huge support system. Well, now they've got this foster family that is coming alongside them and saying, you can do it. And here's a solution to this problem with the child. And here's how we handle this and what has worked with your child in our home. And you've got a wider circle of support, not only for that child, but for the parents. And then even once the child returns home to the parents, the foster families that are really great often will still babysit, they'll still come alongside, they understand what's happening with the children as they grow. And so that support system doesn't actually end. And how great is that? That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yes, we always hear about the bad ones. People don't really want to hear the great juicy stories of the good ones that are just doing the work every single day and loving on kids. But they are out there for sure.
Yeah. Do you have a sense in your heart of what that ratio is?
I have no idea. I think that just like with our own kids, we don't know what happens behind the scenes. We don't know all the things that happen. We can investigate the home and we can make sure that on paper everything looks safe and secure. But we don't really know in detail the good or the bad that's happening behind that curtain until it's either really, really good or really, really bad, tragically. So it's hard to tell. You can a lot of times tell in interactions though by foster families when they're focused on the child, when they're very child centered. It's not about me. It's not about me wanting to adopt this child from their parent. It's not about what I expect in my home and this child is violating, so they're going to have to leave. It's really about the child. I'm concerned about this with the child. How can we help? How can we be creative? How can I be flexible to support this young person? And utilizing the other resources they have. I mean, it's not easy. It is a lot of time, a lot of patience, and working with a lot of different people in the system to try to navigate the best possible way to care for the children. It's not easy being a foster parent for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I certainly, maybe because I've been blessed to be around such great people, and I completely agree it's impossible to know, but I certainly seem to have an impression that the system's filled with a lot better resources than and a lot fewer bad resources.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously always
I
working to
think
make it better.
that's a good point, Chad. I think that even when we maybe don't agree with how another organization or another foster family or another professional is handling a situation about a youth or a family, I think what we could agree is that for the most part, the intention is there. There's a positive, goodwill intention of why the person is doing the work that they're doing. It may not be exactly how we would do it, but it still comes from a place of good intent.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Certainly. That's awesome. Okay, so you spent roughly 8 years as on the child side.
Yeah, not 8, 9.
Okay.
Something like that. Yeah.
And then what happened?
So as I was working in the Children's Law Center, my church at the time was doing something called Orphan Sunday, and I don't know if your listeners are aware of what that is, but it's a day around the world internationally where churches and faith communities come together to remember the international orphan and the local foster child. We
It's
don't typically.
Is that in October? Is that about?
November.
November. Okay, it was close.
Yeah, beginning of November. Yeah. We don't typically call foster youth orphans because they are not. Some of them are legal orphans where they have both parents deceased or abandoned, but usually in our system, there are parents that want their children, but for whatever reason, they're not able to care for their children. Maybe it's drugs or abuse or whatever the situation is. They just can't get out from under it. So for a time, the county comes in and takes custody of the children until they're able to get on their feet.
Yeah.
So the children who are in that situation don't feel like orphans and don't want to be called orphans.
Yeah, for sure. There's a reunification goal.
Right. The goal is always reunification at the beginning, and not always, but most of the time. And so, but we understand, right? Is this a faith-based podcast?
It is whatever you want it to be, but no, it is absolutely yes.
Okay, we can take that part out. That question.
It is overtly
Okay.
faith-based.
But we understand that the Bible tells us to care for the widow and the orphan, and that the heart of Jesus is to care for the vulnerable. That's the point of that statement, at least as I read it. And that would include, in our modern day world, children who technically have parents but are not being cared for by those parents at this time, thus the foster child. So we know that there's a biblical mandate to do that. And so this church wanted to do something to celebrate, not to celebrate, but to observe Orphan Sunday. And so I started working on that, and I did it for a couple of years. And we were just talking about how we could do a little more to get the young people involved in the church, and how they could do something, just take a little bit more of a stand for kids who are in the system. And we came up with the idea of putting on a run. And this run took a lot of work. And I'm actually the co-founder of Raising Hope with Dawn Groom, who is a nurse. And that's my favorite nurse that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And not only is she a nurse, but she is a relative caregiver for her niece. She raised her niece, who would have conceivably been in foster care if Dawn hadn't been available to care for her. And
that's a very real part of that community, right? I mean, that happens a lot. Oftentimes that's the best resource for the child, as a relative. Exactly.
When a child is removed from their parent, the first place that the social worker is supposed to look is for relatives, and then family, friends. And then if those are not available or can't be approved for whatever reason, then they need to go into foster care. So that's definitely preferred, that you could put a child with a relative. So that's what happened in that situation. So Dawn has firsthand knowledge of it, and her kids had served in I think it was Chile or something, that they had done a mission project there, and they had worked with children who were orphaned, who were living on the street, and their heart was just pricked for this, like this cause. And so the Groom family really came together, and we started meeting along with another friend, Kat, and we decided to put on this 5K walk, and that proceeds of it would benefit children in the foster care system. I think you joined up with us then, Chad, didn't you?
I did second year, but I'm curious.
Oh,
I don't know
second
if I
year.
ever asked you this. Did you guys know each other prior? You and
We did
And Dawn.
not.
Sorry. Okay.
We did not. And I know, like, if you know us now, that's kind of hard to believe that we ever didn't know each other.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where the youth pastor at the church said, I've got a couple families for you. They're going to help you. And I remember texting back, are they weird? I just was like, I don't remember how I put it, but I was like, are they weirdos or are they cool? And he's like, they're cool families. And so sure enough, they were cool, and we met, and it has become a lifelong friendship for sure.
Oh yeah, you
So
guys are like it's beyond. You're closer than most sisters that I know.
yeah.
You guys are very, very close, which is awesome to see, especially when the cause reunites hearts so closely. Okay, so then that was I'm gonna lose the year.
2013.
Okay, 2013.
Yeah, we started planning in 2012,
Okay.
and then 2013 was the first actual run. And we just had a 5K. I think we raised like $10,000, $11,000, and we put that right back to help children in care. Because what I already knew from representing kids is that I'd have clients who wanted to participate in football, or they wanted to go to violin camp or whatever it was, and there were just not funds to pay for those things. And not just those things, but other things you wouldn't think about, like orthodontia. Youth in care, there's no one to pay for orthodontia. It's not covered by Medi-Cal, Denti-Cal, and so that's a significant issue. Sometimes it's not just cosmetic, but it affects their eating. It's very painful, and those kinds of things are not covered. So all of our money that we raised from this event went towards paying for things like that. And we decided to do it a second year because we were like, that was really fun to plan and effective. We
Yeah, the
made quite a
community
bit of
response
money.
was huge. Yeah.
Community seemed to love it. And so we didn't just do a run. It was a whole festival too, right? We had a kid zone.
Yeah.
We had like 50 food trucks. I mean, not 50, but 50 vendor booths, and then a handful of food trucks. And we just had a great time. And we had over 400 runners that first year. Then we did it a second year, and we did a 5K. When did we add the 10K? I don't think we
There
added
was a
that yet.
10K that second year. Yep, there was.
There was?
There was.
Oh yeah, we just did it twice.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we did the 10. That was when Chad joined us. Yay. And you were in charge of our race actually, right? Or the running,
Yeah.
the race route. Yeah. Did such a good job with that. And we expanded our kid zone and everything grew that second year and just kept growing. And then in the third year of the event, we decided to incorporate into a nonprofit. And that was when we started Raising Hope. So the event itself was called the Hope for Kids Festival and Run, but the organization is called Raising Hope, just because trying to find the right name that is allowed and all that was difficult. But yeah, so that's when we incorporated into Raising Hope, formed our board of directors, which you were on. Can I say that?
You can. It was a fantastic. I loved being on your board of directors and being involved in Hope for Kids too. I know I miss you all as well. Trust me. But
Welcome back anytime.
It's great to see what you guys are continuing to do. But as you guys made that transition, obviously there's benefits to being your own organization versus kind of operating that event under another charitable organization, which is how it began. For anyone who might be interested in starting a charitable organization of their own, walk us through a little bit of that, because that's a massive shift from I'm an attorney, I'm working in law. It's in this field, right? Same field, but of child advocacy. And what was that experience like to completely shift hats to being not only a business owner, but a business owner of a charity?
Well, first of all, I didn't even know how to start incorporating. As an attorney, everyone's like, "Oh, it'll be a piece of cake for you." I'm like, "Well, I'm not that kind of attorney, and I need some information." So luckily, I have a good friend from college. His name is Ben Woodward, and he has a company called Nonprofit Elite, and that's all they do. They help business at charities incorporate, and they help not just with the incorporation, but a little bit afterward, and they work all over the country. So he really helped me a lot. He walked me through what I would need to do. He let me do the parts that I could do as a lawyer, and then he helped me finalize it. So really grateful for that resource. And once we were a charitable organization, oh my goodness, the learning just kept happening. There was a lot of different things that I needed to fill out this form now and that form now and register with my local county and then my local city for a business license. And I needed a DBA, a fictitious business license to operate as Hope for Kids sometimes and open a bank account, but it was a special bank account for a nonprofit. So there are a lot of different things to be aware of. But I think what I would say is the actual running of the organization is very it, it's definitely a learning curve. You have to be patient with yourself. I have struggled with this feeling like, what am I doing here? How did I get here? This is not my wheelhouse, right? You could be the best lawyer in the world when you're in court, but then that doesn't mean you're going to be great at running the law firm, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So that's a very different skill set. And really, I wish many times that I had gotten a JD MBA, a joint degree that, my law school offers. Um, but I, alas, did not. And I have thought about going back and trying to get an MBA, a nonprofit management degree. But who has time to do that when you're actually running the nonprofit, right?
Yeah.
So, and who has the money when you're being paid
Running
a
a
nonprofit
nonprofit.
salary? Right?
If
So,
if you're
um,
being paid a nonprofit salary.
right, right, which, yes. So, the great thing about it was that I tried to surround myself with board members who had that business experience, right? Staff your weaknesses. And it will like push up against you, right? It's like it's not always comfortable to hear that other side, that person who has a different experience and different skill set. Important to be able to hear that. And in my case, sometimes it's taken me a while, right? Because I have the vision, the passion for how this should be. And now I have the like hard-nosed business people coming in saying, but you have to look out for this as well to sustain the business, the organization. And that has been hard for me at times. Now I can say we're about um, 5 years in to the nonprofit, 4 to 5 years. And I think I'm getting better at that. So that is something that is learned, loosening the reins on my vision and letting the vision be a little more flexible and letting my board members in to help shape that vision with me. And that just comes with, I think, um, the trusting your
Yeah,
board.
that relationship
And
has to develop a bit, right?
yes, yeah. And kind of being able to take a step back, see the bigger picture, have a wider lens than just the narrower lens. I started this thinking, here's a hole, here's something that's missing, the funding for these kids to pay for these things. And I was very focused on that. And now that we've grown and we're meeting other needs, our mentoring, our life skills classes are about to debut. They got waylaid by COVID, but they will launch after that. And now these other little things that I was focused so hard on are not quite as important. Still factors, still information, but they inform what we do, but they're not everything that we do. So that was a growth area. I think it's just really important to staff. I mean, they talk about that a lot right now. Board diversity is really, I mean, it's a hot topic right now, especially when we're talking about racial diversity, but they talk about including the population that you're serving, the backgrounds that you're serving that may not look and feel like you, and they may have different views than you. And I think about that a lot because my board while they're not the most diverse, I'll just be honest with you, as far as like racially diverse, but they are background diverse and viewpoint diverse. And that in itself has caused some bumping up against what my belief is and what my values are. And we want to expand that diversity so that we are serving more, that we have a board that also represents the population that we're serving. So that's something intentional that we're doing. But it's just going to get harder, right? As you incorporate more people from different backgrounds, the organization becomes richer as that friendly conflict occurs, so that you can get the best outcome for what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that's really cool. Do you think so? You went to Pepperdine. I hope it's okay to say
Go
that,
Waves.
right? So,
Yeah.
do you think your direction and or where you ended up would have been different? I know it's hard to know for sure, but do you have a sense of whether or not you would have ended up in a different place had you gone to, let's say, USC School of Law or to UCLA for law school or Georgetown?
Yeah, that's hard. I don't know, but I will say this. I'm very fortunate because I went to Pepperdine undergraduate and I also went to Pepperdine Law School. And there's a huge service leadership component at Pepperdine. They really instill that in you. There are a lot of well-rounded students there and people that care. Many have a faith, some don't, but there's a faith that comes from the top down, and an understanding that when you have been given, I think it's in our mission statement, when you've been given a lot, much is expected, right? Freely give, freely receive, freely give. And that has impacted me because the staff, the professors, they knew me, they took time to know what was in my heart, to see in me what potential was there. And that was just so important for a kid like me who grew up with kind of a rocky situation and didn't really know who I was going into college. And then further going into law school, just having the opportunity to try something that was not your typical in the box legal experience. It was huge. And they really champion that. They really want their students to give back to the community, and they model it. So from week one, I think it's the second month of school, freshman year, you're doing Step Forward Day. You're serving all over your community. And that is just instilled in you over and over throughout the experience. So I definitely think, I can't say that I would be in a different place if I had gone somewhere else, but I definitely know that Pepperdine impacted where I am today. If
Yeah,
that makes sense.
absolutely does. Yeah, that's cool. And they just recently honored you with top 40 alumni over 40. Is that right?
Oh,
Not to throw
yeah,
out
that
your
was a few
age,
years ago.
but
Well, I just have to clarify that, Chad. First of all, that was 2 years ago that they honored me. I believe that honor came in August 2 years ago. Let me tell you something.
and you
I
were
had turned 40.
35.
Well, I was 25, Chad. Don't be rude. No, I had turned 40 in July, and they honored me as 40 over 40 in August. I was like, now let me tell you something. They did a 40 under 40 in the spring of that year, and I could have qualified for that, but they chose to wait till I was 40 and 1 month and call me out as being 40. So, I love Pepperdine, so I was going to go with it, but I just need to clarify 40 over
Was just
40.
barely.
Yes.
Just barely
Yeah.
over 40. That's awesome. Okay, well, we're going to look for you at 50 over 50 too, just as I know it's a
I'm
ways
sure
out
they'll do
there.
that.
I'm sure it'll be on the list.
July 13th, they'll want to honor me just to put my age out there that I'm 50.
Yeah. Well, it keeps us all humble, right? Not to
I'm
worry
very
about.
honored, and I'm very thankful that they honor the alumni and that they gave us a chance to talk about Raising Hope and what we do. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. Okay, so recently you added another fun adventure to your list in addition to running Raising Hope. Tell us a little bit about your current situation.
Yeah. So I, as an attorney, have had a private adoption law practice that I've done just to supplement income through the years, um, and have just done a few cases of friends and family or personal referrals. But in the spring of this year, Ted Humans from FamilyBuilding, he is a very renowned adoption attorney, and his firm has set the precedent for so many adoption cases that have become the standard for how we do adoptions. And I had the privilege of working with him on a case, and he asked if I would come and work for him and his firm, FamilyBuilding. And they're based out of Orange County, but they work all over the state and actually other parts of the country as well. So I was very honored. And now I am working with that firm doing adoption law. We do independent agency adoptions. We do adult adoptions, step parent adoptions, and international readoptions. The beauty of the adult adoption, if I can just mention this right here, and how it crosses over with the foster care field, is that a lot of kids who are in the foster care system are aging out of foster care. They have somebody in their lives that they view as mom or dad. Maybe it's a current or former foster family, or maybe it's a teacher or a family friend. Whatever reason, they're not able to adopt. It might be legally that their parents still have rights and they can't be terminated, or it might be that they're about to enter college and they're going to get some financial benefit from having that status that they aged out of the foster care system. That is very common. And so they don't adopt the young person when they're a minor. Adult adoption allows that child, who's now an adult, to become part of that family legally and permanently. And it's so simple to do. A lot of people don't realize it. But when you have a youth that you've always looked at as your child, but isn't legally your child, this is a really quick and easy way to make that official. And it's so beautiful because we even see people who are well into adulthood, maybe they're parents themselves. And here they are all of a sudden becoming adopted into a family. And there's just something beautiful about that sense of belonging. And so that's a really neat option for children that have aged out of foster care and maybe feel alone in this world, but they still have that one phone call that they will always make, that family that they call home, but it isn't officially.
Wow, that's really cool. Now, is that limited only to kids who have aged out of the adoption
No,
or the
I could
foster
adopt you, Chad.
care? I careful what you ask for.
It's not limited. Anyone
Okay,
can do it.
that's really
Yeah,
interesting. I didn't even know that was a thing. I mean,
yeah.
I've heard of that in cases of aged out foster youth, but I've never heard of it in another context or even thought about it, I guess, in another context.
Yeah, I can give you an example. I have a friend, I don't think she'll mind sharing, I won't share her name, but she she was never in the foster care system, although she really should have been. She really could have been. She lived basically on her own. She raised herself for many years living on her own with a sibling. And then in the last couple of years of school went to go live with this family, and they provided her just that steadiness that she needed to finish high school and go to college. And she's just super smart, really, really great student. And so that was sort of her way out of the life that she had been given. And this family supported her, through college and emotionally. And she came home and she called them mom and dad, and she spent holidays with them, but they were never officially her mom and dad. So flash forward now, she's married. She has 4 kids now. At the time, she had 2.5. She was pregnant with her third, and we did an adult adoption to make it official. And I'm telling you, it was the most beautiful thing. I mean, here's this woman, she's going in with her husband and her 2 kids, and she's pregnant, and she's being adopted into this family. And just the beautiful um, tears that were shed, knowing that that family was complete in some way, and that grandma and grandpa were officially grandma and grandpa to those kids. It was a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, wow, that is. Um, I'm glad most people just hear this podcast and don't see it. but no, that's crazy powerful, and I think that's a beautiful image of the family of God too, right? Like to regardless, that man, what a beautiful idea. There is a designation for working with in the area of child law, and I'm reading the National Association of the Counsel for Children Certified Child Welfare Law Specialist. Is that still the active title that you carry?
Right. So lawyers are not allowed to say they specialize in a certain field unless we've passed a specialist certification. And for my field, it's through the National Association of Counsel for Children. And you have to take kind of a mini bar exam on the topic of child welfare law and have your background checked and submit writing samples. And it's kind of a process. And then you can become a child welfare law specialist. So I did that a couple of years ago, and it's great.
Just so everybody listening knows, we're not dealing with an amateur. She knows her stuff.
Always learning, though.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So much to learn.
Now that you're active with family building, has that influenced any of your experience back on Raising Hope, or is it just keeping your fire lit?
Yeah, it's interesting because we're doing some adoptions in the dependency court right now. So there's a crossover. And that is really interesting. My boss, Ted Humans, he calls it impacting, these generational lines, right? And that if we can impact potentially through adoption, the generational lines, then we can really impact the foster care system. There's a couple of different ways to approach any change, dealing with what is, and then also working on the prevention side. So working with, I have real passion for helping families. And then also there is the idea that if someone is unable to parent and they're aware of that they can make a choice. It's a dignified, beautiful choice to find a family to raise their child. And then there can even be contact after the adoption is final, so that there's this sort of partnership, right, where the child is loved by even more people than just they would have been otherwise. And so just understanding that crossover in a greater way and how we can really impact this generation, and seeing and generations moving forward, seeing how adoption, I've always had such a challenging time with adoption in a way. It's beautiful. It's what I want God. That's what I know that the Lord has done. He has adopted me into his family. But it's always the result of something that should not have been, right? The reason that I need to be adopted by the Lord is because of my sin, right? Because of the choice to sin that has entered this world. And now we've had Jesus had to come and sacrifice his life for us, and now we are adopted as children. And it's the same way with adoptions that are happening today, where something that should have been, that could have been, isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so this other beautiful thing is coming in to take care of the situation or to envelop this child, but it's still a result of something that shouldn't have been. And so a lot of families that I talk to who've adopted either independently or through the foster care system, when that adoption is final, there's great joy, and just they're elated that this is finally done, and there's great peace in their heart. But there's also this little bit of pain because they understand that there's a loss there, a permanent loss. And so I love it when that loss is minimized by a cooperation between the families. That's just such a beautiful thing. It can't always be the case for a lot of reasons, but yeah. I just think it's beautiful. It's important to remember that adoption, while it makes a huge impact in the future, is the result of something painful that did happen, just like our adoption in Christ.
Yeah. And I think that's something that is easy to overlook relative to, or specifically related to, that idea of how do we help on the front end before the situation arises, right?
Yeah.
In a second, I'd like you to share a bit about the difference of, there are many organizations that exist to support and advocate for the foster community. Um, and I want you to highlight some of the ways that Raising Hope is doing that specifically. But how can, whether it be Raising Hope or otherwise, right, whether it be through mentorship or life skills, or what are some of those front end strategies that can help, or that people can start to explore mentally, that would help prevent a foster care situation from arising?
Sure. Well, we're in this really weird time right now, right, with COVID-19. And one of the main ways that child abuse is exposed is through the schools, because school is one of the only places where children are mandated to be. And so teachers are, my husband's an elementary school teacher, and we have many friends that are wonderful people. And through the years, they've had their moments where they've had to make a call about a potential child abuse situation. And now, with schools being out, they're not seeing it. They're not able to make those calls. They're not able to check up on those kids that they know are vulnerable. Even kids that are having a hard time eating, maybe, they get meals at school. The school districts are still offering meals out here, which is wonderful. But the teachers aren't able to check in on the kids and see them. And that's been really hard, not just for the teachers, but also, from what I hear, the rates of child abuse reporting are down. And so that is concerning as well. I mean, it would be great if we thought that the rates of reporting were down because child abuse was down. But given the fact that they're not in school and also not going to the doctor as much, right? A lot of those checkups were put off or they were being done virtually. And so the doctors and nurses and teachers are very key in seeing these children. And so that's what I would say to people out there just living your life in the community, is to see the community around you, see the children in your neighborhood, and in the Target parking lot, or wherever you might be. Just keep your eyes open. Now, like, that doesn't mean that if someone is parenting, if you see me and I am tired and I am hollering at my kid, that's not necessarily something that needs to be reported. But if you see some serious abuse where there's like something physical, like really physical, not a spanking on the bottom with an open hand, but like a real whack, or a threat that sounds very frightening and scary, or just something inappropriate where in your gut you just are concerned about something. We have to be real about this, though, because everyone has different perspectives of what's appropriate parenting, what's good parenting. And a lot of parents have been reported for something that didn't rise to the level of abuse. But at the same time, I'll tell you, if you think that a child is at risk for abuse or neglect, you don't need to know for sure that they're being abused or neglected. If you see something, you can report it. It's not your job to investigate the whole thing or find out for sure that this is happening. You can make the call and the social worker will investigate. You don't have to even give your name, but they will investigate if they think that it's something significant. And the warning signs are things like children who are withdrawn, who are overly affectionate, who are maybe not connected at all, who flinch at a touch, who look emaciated. Maybe they're dirty. They're not able to have clean clothes. They're smelly. There are a lot of different indicators for that. Unfortunately, for children, though, a lot of those indicators could be regular teenage behavior. It could be just children that don't know how to clean themselves very well, which is 95% of the children in this world, I think, who just don't want to shower or whatever. So you just have to have common sense and watch and see and take it in and think about it. And if you're a praying person, pray about it, but make the call so that these kids can be protected. And if you know the family who's fostering, support that family. If you have someone in your church who's fostering, bring them a meal, offer to babysit. You can babysit. The prudent parent standard allows them to select a babysitter, just like a one-off, that they would have babysit their own kids. So you don't have to go through special licensing or anything like that. You can just offer just give them a night out. That's huge.
Yeah.
If they have a child with special needs, learn how to help care for those special needs and give them a little bit of a break, give them a nap, grocery shop for them, ask them what they need and step into that gap.
Yeah. I
And then
think
for
that's
the
something
older,
that almost everybody can understand in being trapped
yeah,
at home, right? Where everybody's around their
we all
kids a
need to
lot
give each
more,
other
right?
breaks.
You need a break.
Yes.
You need a break. Yeah.
Everybody does, yeah. And then just for those older kids, kids are in group homes, and people don't even realize that that group home could be next door to you. They're just 6-bed group homes. People ask me this all the time. Where are these group homes and what do they look like? And I'm like, well, they look like your house, and it's just a small little house. Six kids live in there. It's like a 3-bedroom, maybe a 4-bedroom. They've got a staff person coming in and out, but there are 6 girls in there or 6 boys in there, and they could use some housewarming. They could use some games to play. Especially right now, we delivered a bunch of games to some of the group homes because they're all stuck in there. How awful! They're all
Yeah.
stuck in there, and they don't even know each other. Some of them. And giving them productive things to do, crafts, going over and just getting to know the kids, bringing a pizza party. Obviously, some of this has to wait till after COVID is died down a little more, but just
Yeah.
seeing it. Don't turn your eye away from it.
Yeah. I'm just sitting here trying to brainstorm this concept of, and partly because it's part of our mission too, in serving and developing mentorship programs for the, especially the older teens who are getting ready to, become adults and have to launch, right, and to prevent failure to launch. And but I also just realized, as you're talking about kind of these preventative thoughts, we obviously focus on kids who are already in the system, right? And I'm wondering, is there a way to identify those at-risk families who aren't part of the system yet, right? But maybe, unless they're themselves looking out for example, big brothers, big sisters or something, is there a way to identify those families before they get there so that we're, kind of doing preventative before it's, I don't know. It's just literally crossing my mind. I haven't thought through this at all, so I apologize for throwing it out there completely
Yeah.
on the spot. But I'm just wondering if you've ever heard of or thought of how do we
Yeah.
identify those who are at risk of ending up in the system?
Well, that's huge, Chad. And I have such heart for that. We talked about this, I think, when we were forming Raising Hope early on. And I very much wanted to use the term, you know, child abuse and neglect rather than foster care, because not all children who are abused are in foster care. Some are living at home enduring the abuse, right? And so it's important to fight the abuse on whatever front we can and prevent it from getting to the point where the child is in the system and the family's in the system. So some of that people would say is helping these youth, right? Because they are often their parents were in the system. And so by helping the youth now who are in the system, you're preventing potentially their children from going into the system. And that in itself is something.
Mm-hmm.
There are also programs for families that are at risk of going into system. I know that our county has a program for some of the families that are at risk of entering the system. We provided a bunch of groceries for them early on in during the COVID season, and I wasn't aware of that program until then. But basically, social workers kind of monitor and give feedback. There also is an option when a social worker is called out to a home for an allegation of abuse or neglect. They can leave the child in the home. They can choose not to remove the child and not even to open a court case on that. They might just open an internal case and provide referrals and services to the family and say, if you can do all of these things, we won't file a case. Because this is like a mild situation, right? It's not a severe allegation. It's just maybe they need some parenting skills, or maybe they need to understand some discipline techniques or something just to improve parenting to make it a little more appropriate, but the child is not maybe at risk of like serious harm or death. And so they can leave the child in the home and provide services to prevent removal. And that's a beautiful thing right there, because those families are really getting what they need. And if they can be identified and not be filed on, that's really the best of all the worlds. And there are organizations that work with them. My dream is to have a family to family mentoring program where my family could mentor another family with kids maybe younger or this or similar age to mine, and we can talk about parenting styles and come alongside and give them breaks, because they need breaks too. A lot of these families are working many jobs, taking several buses to get to their jobs and struggling. Some of them maybe don't speak the language well, and so they're having to cross those barriers, and um, don't even know what things are saying, the paperwork and materials that they're seeing. And so being able to have a family to family support system could be a really beautiful thing. And there is a program called Safe Families for Children. We don't have it in our county yet, but there it's all over the country. And basically what it is those families that a social worker has identified as being at risk, but they don't really rise to that level of filing, they can be referred to the Safe Families program, which is done through churches, and churches will train up families to become safe families, safe family homes, and the children can go to those homes to stay. It could be just for a weekend, like a cooling off period, or it could be longer term, and the families come together. It's never about adoption, because that can create a weird dynamic, right? Once
Mm-hmm.
children are in foster care, if a foster family wants to adopt those children, but the bio family wants them back, it's hard for those two to become friends, right? No matter what the outcome is, there's some pain there. But in safe family homes, it's not about adoption. It's always about supporting that family of origin. And so once the child goes home, that support continues. So I've always thought it was a really great program,
Yeah,
and
I really
it's a
like
great
that.
option for churches and counties. Yeah.
That's cool. Okay. Well, I appreciate you bringing that up. I had no idea that was out there either, and I thought I knew a lot. Clearly, I have a lot more research to do. Um, so tell me a little bit about how you mentioned your husband's a teacher and you've got two kids. How has all this impacted them? I mean, just observing you, obviously they're sharing you and a lot of your time resources, but they've got to also be inspired by and touched by all this as well. How's your path in this arena affected your family?
Right. Well, a lot. It's affected them a lot. This is not a one person gig, when you're running a nonprofit, and they're all part of it. They're all making sacrifices. My kids have been drug along with me to deliver items, to put on events, and they love it for the most part. They really do. But they do crave time with me that I can't always give them. I think it'd be like that with any job, but certainly with a nonprofit job, I always am struggling with this. I want my children to know that they are my priority, even though I look at it like I have all of these children, right? They're all my kids, and I call them my kids. But I do have these two kids that God has put in my family to raise, and they are my priority. So just trying to keep that balance and loving the multitude of children, but also really being able to focus and pour into these children that God has given me and my husband to raise is important. The the starting of the nonprofit has been hard on my marriage too. I'm not saying anything that he wouldn't admit to. He's a great guy, but I couldn't do any of this without his support. I mean, we have children, right? So anytime I'm out, he's in watching the kids. And really, it's a team situation, because we couldn't we couldn't do what we do without each other. So he's a great guy, and he has a heart for children too. That's why
Yeah.
he does what he does with his teaching, and we just do it in different ways. So but the time, the money, the sacrifice, all that it's you got to walk into this with your eyes wide open. I sometimes give presentations to Pepperdine students who are in nonprofit management courses, and they'll ask me, and I'll just tell them straight up, like, you got to know going in that you're putting a lot of time, it's a lot of sacrifice for your family, and you've got to have great partnership in order to do that. So
Yeah.
just being honest.
have they, obviously, like you said, your husband's already got a heart for kids just in his own career path, but have you seen, I mean, your kids were pretty young when you started,
Mhm.
especially, I mean, especially if you include your law career before Raising Hope began, but
Yeah.
have you seen it impact them and how they look at the situation and the crisis, and or are they kind of
Yeah.
just like that's mom's thing? And I mean, obviously they get, like you said, they're with you on some of your deliveries and whatnot as well. But what have you seen in
Yeah.
them?
They don't hear the nitty gritty, right? They don't hear the stories of what's happening to kids. There's a very kid friendly way to present the truth about foster care. And that's what my kids know basically, that some mommies and daddies are having a hard time and they're not able to care for their kids for a while. And so they go and stay with other homes that love on them for a while until they can go back to their mommies and daddies. That's kind of the shortened version of the presentation we give to kids. And that's basically what my kids know of. But they do often ask, like, they have this very interesting understanding of foster care and adoption. They have some dear friends that are adopted, and they just talk about it like, Mom, can we go pick up a baby? Like, can we go, you know, like they just, it's just different than I think other kids talk about it. I want a baby brother. Can we have a baby brother? But my kids are like, hey mom, after we're done with this movie today, can we go down and pick up a baby? I would like a 16-year-old. My daughter wants a baby sister and a 16-year-old sister who can drive her to school. So she's like, craves someone to look up to, and she also wants a little baby sister in her life, and she wants to bring them into the family, and my son does too. So they just have a broader understanding of how families are made, and that children can come from other places than mommy's tummy. And I kind of love that.
It's
And they're all
awesome.
about,
Yeah.
they talk about it a lot, like, Mom, we need to adopt him, we just need to adopt him.
Oh, that's precious.
And so the conversations we have are really great about that. And I think it's still, they're still pretty young at 10 and 12, but as they grow, I hope that it develops a heart of compassion in them.
Well, just imagine. I mean, like you said, they have a different view of what a family is or what a family can be, and that's going to stay with them their whole life. That's going to be amazing. That's really cool. Boy, there's so many places we could go, but I also don't want to keep you forever because I appreciate your time. This whole the theme of our podcast is really highlighting people who've let their faith direct their steps in their life, and in doing so they become these shining examples of how wonderfully life can be lived to be servant led, be impactful, etc. But we also have seen in many circumstances, not all, that the people that we're exploring and getting to know as we interview them have had really challenging childhoods, right? You said you had a little bit of without getting into specifics necessarily, you had somewhat of a rough childhood as far as a broken home or whatnot. Not that it wasn't loving, but there were some still challenges there. And
Mhm.
they overcome those obstacles and still end up leading these amazing lives. Um, Tell me a little bit about, in your case, if you can put the pieces together. Again, you're on the spot, but how did you navigate those challenges and those obstacles and still come out with such a desire to be a helper and not a complainer?
It's a good question. And maybe that's part of my upbringing with my parents. You know, my mom is very positive, and her faith informed her in many ways. And my dad is very much, you know, you just let, I mean, how many times did my dad tell me, well, that's life, Tam, just life's hard, keep going. Like, you know, there was just no excuses to be made. It was, this is it, just go for it and do the best you can. And my mom always really set goals for me. It was never an expectation that I was going to be less than. It was always like, you're going to go to college. She didn't get to go to college, and she always wanted my sisters and I to go to college and get a degree. And feel a little more stable in their lives than she felt. And so that those goals were set for me, which I think is a beautiful thing you can do for your children, to like cast a vision for their lives. And then also just look at the world positively. This is not an excuse. Bad things happen. This world is broken, it's sinful. What do you expect? It's going to be hard at times, but there's also beauty to be had. And if you keep looking for the beauty in this world, people that are making an impact, that are doing the things, decide who you want to align with, and then follow that model. I have so many people that I can think of that informed the person that I wanted to be. I still have people like that in my life today where I look at them and I'm like, ooh, I just want to take that little piece of them and put that in me, and I'm going to follow that and become more this way, and constantly growing and trying to do better and be better. And I think that makes you not dwell on the past, but just look at how you can impact the future, right? It's not about my experience, but how my experience can help someone else who might be hurting or feeling lonely or afraid. And that's all we can do with it.
Yeah.
That's the best thing we can do with it,
Well,
actually.
and I think I think the people who go through those experiences have that gift, right? Because there's that. I've been there, done that. I've felt what you're feeling. I think that's
Well, I think that's in the Bible, Chad. It says, oh gosh, I'm not a Bible scholar and terrible, but there is a verse in the Bible that talks about that you've gone through this so that you can have compassion for others,
yeah,
right? And that's what it's all about. In this life, we'll have troubles, but we can use it to serve the kingdom, the
yeah,
broader kingdom.
for sure. 2 follow-up questions or final questions. First one, walk forward 5-10 years in your imagination, and what needs to happen in those 5 to 10 years for you to turn around, look back, and go, I was as successful as I could have been with those last 5 to 10 years.
Okay, well, the first thing is I really have a heart for the legal representation for children who are in the system. And that just means, and that's just because that's what I know, right? I know that children are assigned a families are assigned a social worker, and everybody is assigned an attorney. And that children's attorney has the power to have confidential conversations with the child or the teenager. So you really hear the truth of what's happening with that kid. And you have a direct line to the decision maker, the judge, on this case, and is impacting the life of a human being. And if we look at these children who are in the system as human beings with the dignity of life and value, and made in the image of God, and having a hope for a future and the future of our world, we will realize that this little case and the decisions that are made in their case they're no small thing. And children should have a voice in that. They should be empowered. It may not need to be the final voice because they are still kids, the brain is developing, and they may not have all of the perspective, but they should have a voice in what's happening to them. They should be heard. And my passion is that legal counsel across this country for children who are in the system and have no other voice but that voice will be strong, caring, competent, and that there will be some standards set for the representation of children so that we can hold CFS, CPS, CFS, whatever the agency in your area is called, we can hold them accountable through the representation of children. A lot of people don't realize that there are lawyers for these kids. Not every state requires that it be a licensed attorney. Sometimes it's an advocate, but in California, it has to be a licensed attorney. Those contracts need to be open for public bidding, just like any other government contract, so that the best possible representation for kids can be obtained. And there also need to be some oversight, some annual audits in place of people that understand this field of law. It's a very small niche. I don't know how you say that word, but it's small, whatever it is. And people who are running the court systems don't always know about this area of law. So they wouldn't even know if they opened up a file what should be in there or what shouldn't be in there. So if I could look back in 5 years and know that we had reformed at least our community in this area, of course, the state, the country, that would be ideal. But if we had made any reform for any kids going forward, I think that would be the biggest thing we could ever do. Another thing that I'd love to see are just our youth coming out, getting 5 years past where they are now and saying, Raising Hope made an impact in my life. I was here, I was looking down this barrel of struggle and pain and loss, and Raising Hope intervened with some life skills, with a mentor. They came alongside me. They put me through school, and now here I am, and I'm at peace. And I've got, not that they don't struggle, because the lifelong struggle is real, but that they are in a different place than they would have been because of Raising Hope and because of the efforts of our amazing volunteers and donors. So those two things would be so meaningful to me.
Yeah, I like that. Those are very good goals, and I know you've been pursuing them hardcore since the day I met you. So share with us verbally. We'll put all these in the show notes as well. But where are all the places people can get a hold of you and or follow you or get a hold of Raising Hope, learn about the different services and programs that you guys are running, how to get involved if they happen to be in the Southern California area and want to get involved with Raising Hope? Share with us those pieces of detail real fast for our listeners.
Sure. So our website is raisinghope.org, and we're also on Facebook at Raising Hope, and then the number 4 kids, Raising Hope 4 kids, and Instagram at Raising Hope Inc. and Twitter at Raising Hope Inc. So you can definitely get a hold of us in any of those ways and follow us, and you'll see the work that we're doing. You can get on our newsletter if you want, which is not existent right now. So if you're good at doing a newsletter, definitely reach out to us. We need volunteers for all kinds of things. And we would love to have you guys as part of the family that's working with these kids.
Yeah. I apologize. I forgot, before I get to my last question, I've mentioned before, and I didn't round back and sweep it up, but Raising Hope, roughly from a high level, we said fills gaps of like you mentioned, some cost needs, rather like orthodontia, maybe fees for being part of, spring baseball. Tell us a bit more about what, in addition to that, as well as more examples of that, some stories about what Raising Hope is doing so people kind of understand the organization better.
Right. So I mentioned the funding piece of it, and we talked about that a lot. But I'll just give you an example of Cassidy. She's this great young lady that we've worked with for years and years. And Cassidy was working 2 jobs. She's kind of a rock star, actually. She works 2 jobs. She's working at a coffee shop and as a nanny. So just to make ends meet, just to pay rent, pay bills, and live a life. And because of COVID, her coffee shop shut down. She was not able to work there anymore. And her nanny job was put on hiatus. So she didn't skip a beat. She started delivering through Postmates and trying to just scramble to make up the money that she needed. But then her car broke down, right? It's pretty important to have transportation when your entire job relies on delivering food through Postmates. So we helped her repair her vehicle. And that was through donors that, also donated specifically for Cassidy. And so we're able to help repair her vehicle so that she only missed, I think in the end, maybe a day and a half of work because we were able to repair her car and she was able to go forward. Now, that car ended up being too old. So the repairs that we did were just a Band-Aid. And then she actually had several more repairs and she ended up needing to get a new car just a little bit later. And we ended up helping her purchase that new car because she's a great investment. She knows how to manage a vehicle. She's working really hard. She had saved up, so she was able to put some money towards it as well. And we really just look at it. We really look at Cassidy as a partnership, right? In her life, she's working hard, and we look at it like if there's a parent available who can support her, they would, right? If that were your kid or mine, and they were really showing promise and really working hard, but they fell on hard times and they were doing all the right things, you as a parent, if you had the resources, would help support them, right? My dad did it for me. I would do it for my kids, but these kids don't always have that. And that's what Raising Hope does, is we'll step in and say, sort of as like a parent figure, we think you're doing great, and we don't want this little bump in the road to set you back, because for our kids who are in care, a setback like that will take all of their savings, if they have any at all. It will completely derail them. If they can't pay rent, for instance, that can become an eviction on their record, and then they'll never be able to find housing again, because they have to have a cosigner. And who's going to co-sign for them to get a new apartment? They don't have that resource, that support system. So it's very important that we preserve the housing that they currently have. So we'll help with rental assistance. Also special medical needs that are not covered by Medi-Cal. We helped a little girl with her cerebral palsy braces in her legs to help her learn to walk. She was 4, I think. And then 6 months later, we got another request for braces for the same girl, because she was growing. Of course, she needed a new size, because that's what 4-year-olds do. And we're happy to do that. So coming alongside those needs and saying, of course, we're going to step into the gap for that. And then we also realize that funding is important, but without that mentoring piece of it, it's definitely can be lacking, right? Cassidy and I have formed kind of a mentoring relationship. We can talk through things, get advice about whatever. She'll call me up. But also, when we're giving out money, we want to be able to say, like, how are you doing? How can we follow up with you? What's happening? And they end up coming to us for advice about other things, like, well, I've got this relationship situation. I don't know if he's the one. I don't know if, or a young man will come and say, I'm looking for a job. What kind of job could I do? I need to get my driver's license. I don't know how to do that. And we can walk them through that process. And so it became clear that mentoring was a huge component for this, that we can give money all we want, and we can also tout foster care all we want. We can try to get people to sign up to foster, but that's a huge deal, right? Getting licensed, inviting the county into your home, and having children come in that you don't know, like, that's a huge commitment. And those who make that commitment are amazing. We already talked about that earlier. But another way that you can get involved without having to make that complete change in your family dynamic is just to mentor. So having that one stable, caring adult can really impact the life of a foster youth long term. And that's what our mentoring program does. So we've got youth that are, it's new. It's a pretty new program. So we haven't even had a year yet, but we're seeing these relationships deepen where youth are in crisis. Previously would have had nobody to call. Now they call their mentor. Mentor meets them right where they're at. Advice that's going on, better decisions are being made by them because of the mentoring that they're receiving. So mentoring was a huge piece of what we wanted to do. We wanted to be in their lives. We want to impact their lives. We don't want to just write a check. We want to say, this is going to be ongoing.
Yeah, that's huge.
And then it's huge. And then we also realize that there's just this component of life skills that are missing. And that can be missing for a lot of reasons. Maybe you're not even in foster care, but because of your socioeconomic background growing up, maybe you were never exposed to, let's say, like a mortgage. You don't even know what a mortgage is because your family never owned a home. So those are just different levels of information you may not have. Or maybe your family did a lot of eating out and you don't know how to cook a meal, and you don't know how to pick out an avocado or whatever that might be. And you're preparing now for adulthood. So you need to be prepared to know how to make some basic meals in your home to save money or whatever it is. And so a lot of our kids have those same issues where they were raised in a group home maybe, or in a foster home that just didn't do some of these things or didn't teach them. So our life skills focus on, and the trainings that our life skills focus on are based on feedback from actual youth that are in care and have aged out of care, and the feedback of what they felt would be helpful to them as they were aging out, and still helpful to them even though they're adults. And so we talk about just cooking, we talk about budgeting, credit, how to build credit. That's huge. Um, how to find stable housing, how to make sure that you're protected in your housing, making sure that you have a landlord tenant agreement of some sort so that you each know what the standards are, and you can't just be kicked out at any moment or mistreated and they can't come in and take your things or walk in when they want. And let's see. Oh, drivers education is a big deal. A lot of our youth don't get to take driver's education and they don't get to take a driver's test. They don't often have a vehicle to learn on because they're in a group home. They don't have a parent that's got a car that'll take them driving, or an aunt that they love or whatever. And so they don't learn. But that in Southern California, where I live, especially, driving is everything, right? Because it's so difficult. Public transportation just doesn't really cut it out here. And everything is so spread out that, where you live, where you can afford to live, is not necessarily where the job is. And so you have to have some form of transportation that's reliable, and you have to be able to drive. So getting these kids a license is a big part of what our life skills are going to be working on too, that there's tangible outcomes for the classes that we're offering. And so that is the newest piece of Raising Hope, is our Prepare Life Skills program. It's a module of 8 to 10 classes that the youth will go through.
Very, very cool. Wow. Are there additional programs you guys have in the pipeline?
Nothing yet. I mean, I think I mentioned the parenting mentoring. That is really on my heart to someday have, where it's like parent to parent mentoring. And just
Can I call dibs
working
on partnering with your family, and you can partner my family?
Yes.
We'll trade kids and see what we can learn from each other.
We have kids the same age, so we just swap. You might not even know.
Right. You'll notice.
And I love your kids. They're great. So, I think just developing those programs and doing them really well is what I want to do in the next few years. I don't want to be adding too much more.
Yeah.
I think the needs that we're meeting are so significant right now that we've really honed in on Raising Hope's wheelhouse, so to speak, that we still give funding to kids 0 to 26, but our programs are focused on those older youth that really need that, that they're not necessarily in a foster family home.
Mm-hmm.
They're maybe in a group home, which is missing some of these components. And so being able to help them transition with less anxiety, knowing that Raising Hope is going to follow them past that dreaded age of 21 when the funding ends and they're on their own, that we're going to be there for them and they still have some support, even as we try to help gradually shove them out of the nest to their own independence.
Yeah.
We're still there as a backup.
Yeah. Such a critical time in their lives. My closing question, and I appreciate you elaborating on all the things that Raising Hope is doing. Phenomenal organization. Obviously, I had the benefit of getting to work, by your side, roughly as a member of your board for a while. But you guys are doing awesome things. And when we have you back, much like my conversation with Mike, I want to have you back again with Dawn, if that's possible, because it'll just make it more entertaining, if nothing else. No, I know it'll be a lot more than just awesome. Entertaining, but
yeah, then you'll get to know the nice one out of that duo. It's not me.
That's not true. That's not true. That's not true. You're both awesome. If nobody ever gets to hear from you again for whatever reason, and you had to share your one nugget of wisdom that will bless people if they hold on to that nugget and live by it, what's Tami's number one nugget of wisdom for our listeners to remember as they move forward?
Dang, that's very intense, Chad. That's like one nugget of wisdom. I have no other wisdom outside of the Word of God. And, when you love God and love others, that's it. Just, it's not about you. This world does not revolve around you or me as one person. It's so much bigger than that. And love God and love people, love his people the way he does. And that's the best thing you can do.
I like that one. That's I couldn't agree more. that's Jesus' ultimate answer, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself, and the rest will work itself out. Very cool. Well, Tami, I want to obviously thank you for your time. I do absolutely want to have you and Dawn back. So if I can put you on the spot and make you agree for her.
She agrees.
She agrees.
She would be so delighted.
Okay,
yes,
very
she's
good.
honored to be asked.
Very, very good. I'm sure she is. Very, very, very much so. So, yeah, no, I thank you so much. I love just, again, being able to highlight a great organization led by great people who are doing great things because they're letting God lead their lives. And your approach and your servant leadership is a wonderful thing. I definitely appreciate. You've been a major blessing in my life relative to getting to see that lived out. So thank you for being such a great example. I know that I don't even know specifically, but I know the number of lives you've touched is massive, and the trickle down of that is going to be huge. And I can't wait to look when we are in heaven someday and be able to see all the places that Raising Hope has touched, and even outside of Raising Hope, all the lives that Tami's touched. To be able to see that is going to be so cool. So thank you,
Chad. I love what you're doing here and highlighting all these great people. And I'm definitely going to be listening to the podcast because I can't wait to hear about all these other things that are happening around the world that are so good. And I love your heart. And I'm so honored that I got to work with you on Raising Hope. And you helped really develop this organization from the beginning, being part of our board. And a lot of that just lives on. So thank you so much for all that you do.
No, it was my honor. Thank you for inviting me originally as well. So I can't wait to talk to you guys again. And we're going to dive probably a little bit more deeply into some specifics because I know we stayed a little bit high level today. But thank you for your heart in the foster care world as well. Obviously, that's a lot of what our organization is aiming to conquer as well. So love to see the people out there doing the work. So
thank you.
Congratulations on a job well started.
Yes. Thank you. It's a great way to put it.
You have to live a lot longer so we can get a lot more done.
Oh, no, I'm tired, but I'll try.
Get some rest. All right. Thank you, Tami.
Okay. Thanks, Chad.